Hello, namaskar, welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, all you have to do is to press that red button on your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free and would also really appreciate if you could like this video and share this video with your friends. All right, Bangladesh. The title of my podcast is that can Pakistan export its nukes to Bangladesh? It is, of course, a provocative title, but this is not a title which I have just thought out of the air or something which I am just fantasizing about or something which can happen in the worst kind of a nightmare situation. There is a possibility. It's a remote possibility, but it is still a possibility which cannot be ruled out. And I'm pretty sure that the policy planners in New Delhi are probably aware of this possibility. They are taking this possibility into their calculations when they are thinking, strategizing, policy planning on Bangladesh. Now, I'm going to talk of this issue, why this possibility, this remote possibility can actually become a reality. But I'm going to talk about that a little later in the podcast. First, what I want to do is to give you an overview of what's currently going on in Bangladesh. Then I want to tell you about the Indian response to Bangladesh. And once we have understood these two situations, then we will go on to the main topic, that's the headline issue of the podcast, that why this nukes thing can become a real problem for India in the foreseeable future. Now, let's look at Bangladesh. Bangladesh, by all accounts, and this is not something which anything is left to the imagination, by all accounts, is not only sitting on a powder keg, but probably that powder keg has already blown. Now, when something is sitting on a powder keg, it goes without saying that not only that blows up, but it causes damage, it singes its surroundings. And obviously, Bengal, the rest of India is very much around Bangladesh, and therefore, the probability that we can also get singed by the developments in Bangladesh is not something we can rule out. Now, the situation is so bad right now that it appears as if probably the entire youth in the country, if not the entire youth, certainly a large section of the youth have become completely radicalized. There is some kind of a Islamic takeover, triggered, of course, by the doings of the Jamaat in Bangladesh, no question about it. Almost to a man, this Islamicized youth hate India. This is a time when we have to actually acknowledge facts. There's no point in browbeating or, in not acknowledging this issue. This issue is very much real, because what the Yunus government or the Yunus administration or this illegal government of Muhammad Yunus really has done is that they have injected so much hate against India vis-a-vis Sheikh Hasina into the minds of the Islamicized youth of Bangladesh, that all this youth in Bangladesh, they actually believe that India was responsible for all the problems of Bangladesh. Everybody has very conveniently forgotten all the help, all the support, the material support, all other kinds of support which India has been giving to Bangladesh ever since 1971. All that has been completely conveniently forgotten. The old linkages with Pakistan are back in place. People there are trying to rediscover their love fest, as it is, you could say, with Pakistan. Pakistani generals are making regular forays into Bangladesh. Some of them have even dared to venture somewhere around the Chicken Neck area. The cooperation between the Bangladesh military and the Pakistan military has certainly stepped up. The Yunus government is, of course, playing a diabolical role in this entire thing, no question about it. And the single biggest reason which people are ascribing to this is that why Yunus is doing this is because Yunus wants to survive. He wants to continue as some kind of a de facto ruler even after elections, if the elections are going to be called in the first place. What really Muhammad Yunus has done really is that he has used this shield of being this Nobel laureate, of a darling of the West, of Western powers, maybe even of America. He has used all this as a kind of a Teflon shield, as it were, to carry on an insidious agenda, not only against the minorities in Bangladesh, but certainly very much against India. Not a day passes when the Yunus administration, its people, don't spew hatred against India. This is, of course, very well known and documented. In response, of course, the Indian government has been very, very mature. I would even go to the extent of saying that the Indian response so far to the Bangladesh crisis has been very tepid. It hasn't been aggressive. All the aggression is actually being shown to that extent by our media, maybe, or maybe by our podcasters. But the Indian government has been fairly maturely tepid in its responses. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But needless to say, the strategy of the Yunus administration is that elections might be on the corner, might not be on the corner. The killings of the two Hindu youth in Bangladesh is being used as a pretext maybe to postpone elections. And then we also know that the BNP leader, that is Tariq Rahman, is back in Bangladesh. He certainly has a certain support base. He has a mass base, but will he be allowed to function? The Jamaat is, of course, very, very close. If they are not already in control of the administration vis-a-vis with Muhammad Yunus as the front face, I personally feel that people saying that the Yunus is being used by the Jamaat, I personally think that both Yunus and the Jamaat are hand in glove. It serves the Jamaat to have the so-called, within quotes, erudite Nobel laureate phase to cover up their insidious activities, their Islamic agenda. And there's no question about it that this Islamic agenda has been unleashed in Bangladesh. So far, notice very carefully that the world attention is still not very much on Bangladesh. People are still talking of Ukraine and Russia and of the Middle East and of Gaza. Gaza is always there on people's mind. But surprisingly, Bangladesh nobody wants to talk about, maybe conveniently, especially in the Western world. But I would also say that in that sense, you have to give, in a certain sense, credit to Yunus, the way he has manipulated events, that he has made sure that the Western world does not turn its eye towards Bangladesh. He's still being given a kind of a clean chit. In fact, there are many quarters in the Western media which actually are looking at, saving face for the Yunus administration when it comes to the killing of somebody like a Deepu Das. But the very fact that two Hindu youth have been killed, and it has really raised the stakes now as far as India is concerned. It's a great, great worry for India. So this is the present situation. It's a powder keg, which probably might have already started going up in flames. And a lot of people feel that Bangladesh is self-inflicting itself with harm, with damage, with long-term ruin and all that. That's all fine. They might be doing that. But the fact of the matter really is, there is, I think, a Yunus strategy very much in place. And this strategy, I think, has been, formed. It is being implemented in cahoots with the Pakistani, the ISI, the army of Pakistan, the regime. It's very clear they're working in tandem. There's no question about it. Let's be very, very clear. And suddenly the entire rhetoric, suddenly the entire circumstances, suddenly everything which is in Bangladesh is being turned on its head, all hostile towards India. And therefore the big, big question which India has to ask itself is, how long? How long can India retain its cool? How long can India retain its patience? How long can India afford to watch from the sidelines before it decides to step in and take action? And the big, big question obviously is, should we even think about taking action in Bangladesh, or we let things simmer there, bubble over, let them deal with their own nonsense, as people say, let them deal with their own, I don't want to use the word S, dot. Should that be the strategy? Should India keep aloof? It is not our problem. Pretend it's not our problem. I personally feel that there is only to that extent we can remain aloof, because the problem is bound to spill over. This is what happened in 1971 when hordes and hordes of people or refugees came over from Bangladesh into India. And tomorrow, if Bangladesh goes up in flames completely, what is to stop tens and millions of these people coming towards India? And it's all right, we have the army, we have the fencing, we have the BSF, we have all that in place. But can it be enough to stop millions and millions of people trying to come force their way into India? These are questions, these are very serious questions which I think are currently probably being debated about, talked about. And then, of course, this issue which I'm raising in this podcast about the nuclear weapons. So let me also talk about a little bit about that. But first, finally, to summarize the overall view in Bangladesh, it is a pretty bad situation in Bangladesh, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of remorse, there doesn't seem to be any kind of repentance, there doesn't seem to be any kind of rethinking, because no pressure is coming on the Yunus administration. And when I talk about pressure, I mean pressure primarily from the Western powers. And there are now some people who are arguing that not enough pressure is probably being applied by India also to almost force or to coerce the US administration to come to its senses, so that we bring this man to his heels and make him see sense of what he is doing to Bangladesh. And let it be known that the entire excuse of Sheikh Hasina being in India and that she was responsible for the killings of so many youth in Bangladesh, this is just a convenient excuse with the Yunus administration, its so-called judiciary, its so-called police is making to allow the festering of hatred inside Bangladesh, which is non-stop, continuing 24/7. And of course, let's not forget the human angle also in this entire thing, where the minorities, especially the Hindu minority, is actually at a grave risk. Imagine that every day you wake up, you don't know whether this could be the last day in your life, whether the mobs from across the street or in the neighborhood or from anywhere can emerge. They can burn you down, they can pillage your house, they can rape your women, any kind of thing, which all these things are happening in Bangladesh, as you can see from the instance of these two youth which have been killed. And look at the way the Yunus administration, for instance, has been justifying about the second youth, the Mandal person who was killed, that he was some kind of a criminal, he was some kind of an enforcer. Even if he was all that, does it give you the right to kill that person? Somebody should be asking that question. And surprisingly, but also not surprisingly at the same time, the Western media is completely silent on all this. They don't want to address, they don't want to talk about this issue. All the BBCs of the world, the France 24s of the world, all the Washington Posts of the world, the New York Times, everybody is silent on this issue. And therefore, the onus really, whether we like it or not, is now on India. That what are India's next moves going to be? What is going to be India's strategy? Because a time is coming, and it's coming very, very near, when we cannot ignore this mayhem, this violence, this persecution of the Hindu minority, because the real big danger for India also are twofold. Number one, it can actually spark off unrest within our own country, because people don't like it that a fellow community is being demonized in Bangladesh. They are now on the verge of, if not already, the genocide has already started for the Hindu community. How long will you be able to ignore that? Now, having said that and giving you this overview of what is really happening in Bangladesh, let's talk a little bit about the Indian response, and then I'm going to talk about this fundamental question which I'm raising in this podcast about the nukes and the nuclear weapon. The Indian response has been, by and large, I think, mature, and there's a reason for that. We haven't rushed into a domain or into an area where angels fear to tread, as the saying goes, and with good reason, because Bangladesh can become a quagmire. There are those, probably, maybe some in the Western world, who would love to see India caught up in a Ukraine-like situation. They would love to see India strike Bangladesh. Maybe a land war erupts, and despite whatever some podcasters on our side also are saying, oh, it will be a 2-day war and we will just take over chicken's neck, then we can we can carve out a separate piece of territory for the Hindus of Bangladesh. It'll be quick and easy. I'm sorry, I personally don't believe in all these things. I think any conflict is a dangerous thing, especially where there are feet on the ground, where there are soldiery is used. It can become a very dangerous thing. Even not very powerful countries can really, create a lot of problems for you. And the Indian government knows that, I think. And the last thing they want to do is when a time of when our economy is really on the upswing, when things are really doing well, the growth rate is, everything is inching upwards, everything is going up, that you want to get trapped in a quagmire, in a military quagmire in Bangladesh. Nobody wants that. And therefore the reluctance of the Indian government to take precipitate action in Bangladesh is to that extent understandable. But here's my point. Having said that, and I understand that, I said kudos to the Indian government for maybe tepid responses. The MEA actually made a statement last week where after quite some bit of time they voiced their concern. They outlined a number of incidents, which are almost close to 3,000 incidents of the minority communities in Bangladesh being harassed, being subjected to all kinds of torture, all kinds of evil things. That, of course, the MEA has said. But as I said, action has been withheld. Now, the point is, which I am making in this podcast, is that so far so good. But it cannot just retain. This is not the matter. Not to India, because Bangladesh is unrelenting, or rather, the administration of Yunus, which is not only backed by the Jamaat, hand in glove with the Jamaat, but backed also by Pakistan, by the ISI, but probably even by some Western powers and Western intelligence agencies. It's not going to stop. It's going to be unrelenting. This situation in Bangladesh is going to deepen further and further. It's a big question mark if Tariq Rahman will be allowed to operate or allowed to contest freely. And even if he does, my own guesswork is that Yunus will find a way to still retain in power, to be in power as some kind of a de facto ruler. Something like Wasim Munir has done in Pakistan, where the government is that of ostensibly of Shehbaz Sharif, but actually everybody knows that the levers of power are firmly in the hands of Wasim Munir. So something similar maybe Yunus is also planning. This is probably what he's taken his lessons from, that I can do the same thing. Maybe the same thing has been told to Yunus by Asad Munir, that who knows, that if I can do this in Pakistan, why can't you do this in Bangladesh merrily? I'll control that part of the country, you control this part, and then obviously we can join together or whatever. There is a possibility of all these things. We cannot take our eyes off the ball of what's happening out there, which means, what does it mean? It really means that our policy of restraint, our policy of tepid responses, our policy of watching carefully from the edges, from the sidelines, how long can we do that? Because as I said, the big problem for us is that it can eventually spill over in India. The problem can come home to India. Elections are fast approaching in Bengal. It can affect the elections in Bengal. This can become a major issue, not only in Bengal, but in the rest of the country. As I said, the process of the SIR process, SIR process of sending back all the illegals to Bangladesh, that can probably be affected in a very devious way. There are all kinds of possibilities. There are all kinds of tricky situations which can develop for India. And therefore, how long can India control and retain its kind of a, I would say, not neutral, but certainly a kind of a very balanced posture. But that's not the only problem. The other problem is that if we monitor these developments very, very closely in Bangladesh, then we will understand that there is now talk of Bangladesh, and I don't know where they're getting the resources from. It's a wonder that they're even talking of all this. There's talk of Bangladesh acquiring Eurofighters. Eurofighters are very advanced jets. And how are they even talking about that? Which probably means that somebody has promised them that we will give you Eurofighters, we will give you these advanced weaponry. There is talk and engagement, as said, between the armies of Pakistan Army and the Bangladesh Army. And therefore, I am now posing this question. It's a rhetorical question. It's a question which I don't really have any facts to prove that this can happen, or it's even a possibility, but we cannot rule out the possibility that what if Asim Munir, and we all know that he is now, there is no question about it, he is the madman of South Asia, Asim Munir. The madman of South Asia, Asim Munir, promises the Bangladesh regime that, okay, I will give you maybe 2, 3, or 4, or whatever nuclear weapons. Then we will apply this pincer kind of a pressure on India from both the East and the West. You have your nuclear weapons. We can change demography. This entire talk which is going on and on in Bangladesh by way of the Seven Sisters being severed from the Indian mainland. Maybe they might actually be thinking of all these possibilities. And I know, yes, we have set up military garrisons, we have bolstered our troop movements, our troop strength, and all these sectors. I know about that. That's true. But at the same time, supposing if these Eurofighters come, supposing if some of these nuclear weapons are shipped to Pakistan, then, ladies and gentlemen, the possibility of in 2026, the Cuban Missile Crisis, a repeat of that occurring in the Bay of Bengal, that possibility again can arise. Mark my words. That can happen. Because please take your mind back to the 60s when the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted. Cuba nuclear weapons were shipped by the then Soviet Union to Cuba. America gave a deadline, and America said to Russia, to the Soviet Union, that you have to take these. Otherwise, you and I, that the Soviet Union and America would actually end up having a full-fledged nuclear war. It was a huge crisis, but it was, of course, resolved, and Russia withdrew those nuclear weapons. But the possibility of a subcontinental Cuban crisis erupting in the Bay of Bengal cannot be ruled out. That, I'm sure, is a worry for our Indian policy planners. And therefore, and in the last part of this podcast, I'm now coming to this conclusion, and I'm coming to the solutions for this problem. And what could be the solutions? Do we go into a war with Bangladesh? Do we attack Bangladesh? Do we try to not only take over Chicken's Neck, but we kind of carve out an entire territory right up to Chittagong port? What do we do? And the short answer is, I will not be a warmonger. I am not going to advocate any such thing that a government does, because all wars can be very costly, very tricky affairs. And yet at the same time, we are mindful of this threat, remote possibility, but it is still a threat of nukes. So what do? I think we should go in for a middle course. And the middle course, the middle way, the middle path is something which I call is the Trump way. And Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has actually shown this way. And what is that? What he is doing? He is doing that exactly by enforcing his version of the Monroe Doctrine in South America and in Central America vis-a-vis what he's doing to Venezuela. Which means without sending your troops, without engaging your artillery, without sending in your jets, without using the BrahMos missiles, without doing all that, you basically target shipping every ferry of movement which are going to the Bay of Bengal, from the Bay of Bengal towards Chittagong port. That is the solution. You don't actually invade Bangladesh, but you kind of literally become the masters of the Bay of Bengal. You target any kind of and it could be on any pretext. The Americans use the pretext of that cocaine and drugs and they're being smuggled out of Venezuela. Well, you can also think of 10 different things. You can think of that arms are being smuggled across to Bangladesh. It affects our security. There are so many other pretexts you can use, but you start targeting ships, small boats, this, that. Stop the movement. In a kind of a way, you use a very subtle blockade of the Chittagong port. That is probably the middle way, the correct way, without engaging your troops or putting your troops. And if the Bangladesh army retaliates something, then of course you have your Pinakas, you have your artilleries. They can do the rest of the job, but don't commit your soldiery as yet. Keep your powder dry. Don't get into that. Don't engage in a land war. But there's so much you can do through the air, through the naval. We are one of the strongest navies in the world. The Navy can actually do this job for us and sustain this pressure, like the Americans are sustaining the pressure on Venezuela day after day, week after week, month after month, continue till a time comes when Bangladesh breaks. Whatever regime, it doesn't make a difference to us, whatever regime is there, whether it's the Islamists or whether it's the BNP, because the Awami League has been taken out of the equation. Fine, if the Awami League for somehow manages to come back, well and good. But you make them, you bring them to their senses where they sue for peace. They said, we will agree to your terms, and then you put down your terms. And your terms mean not only expanding the chicken neck area, but also to some extent establishing a kind of a de facto control over Chittagong port. That is the way to go. That's the way to enforce this, and the Indian Navy can easily do that. Yes, what it would mean is, of course, there is always a threat of sanction at a time when our economy is in the upswing. The government would be worried that Western nations can impose some kind of sanction. But then you can argue that we are not invading the country, but we are protecting our own mainland. We are protecting arms, ammunition, maybe even drugs, maybe all kinds of spurious things from entering into Bangladesh. We are protecting basically India, really. That is the pretext you need to use, but that's the way to get in. That's the way to control everything, the waters around Bangladesh. People keep talking of chicken necks. Chicken necks is only one part of the thing, really. The real problem is always to attack the lifeline of a country. Like Karachi is the lifeline of Pakistan. Because if you attack Karachi, obviously it means then you are in a full-fledged war with Pakistan. Similarly, Chittagong is also in a certain sense a lifeline of Bangladesh, because if you control that, then Bangladesh becomes a landlocked country, and how much of stuff can enter through the air. So these possibilities are here, and then you lay down your doctrine. Then you lay down that Bangladesh cannot have what is called an air force. It cannot have artillery pieces of a certain caliber. It cannot have an army beyond a certain troop strength. These are conditions which India should apply as the big power in the region. We should be doing. Take a cue, take a leaf out of the playbook of what America does. That's the right way to do it, because yes, we can argue till the cows come home in terms of morality, in terms of if this is right, ethically not, or this thing. All that is fine. Keep that aside for a moment. Think of self-interest, think of self-preservation, think of what is most important for your country and how it can affect your country in the long run. And obviously the biggest thing is you keep the Pakistanis at bay by this kind of action. So the middle path, the path without sending in your troops, without invading Bangladesh, this is the way to do it in Bangladesh. Kill all these problems with a single decisive action. But the question really, of course, is anybody in Delhi listening to all this? I hope they do, because for me, at least, this appears to be the most sensible part. But then as podcasters, that's all we can do. We can suggest, we can give our ideas to the government. But then it's, of course, up to the government how much they want to take it up and what is the best possible course of action. But lots to watch out for in the Bangladesh story. We'll keep an eye on it. And of course, I'll come back to you with more updates or other interesting developments on the Bangladesh situation. And so on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.